Hello, people. How you doing tonight? Tonight's a special show. We have a very special guest host tonight, Mr. Jim Melvin. He's the author of the Death Wizard Chronicles. He's written for newspapers. He's edited for the St. Pete Times. Um, he's just a very special guest host, and we'll also be talking about transitioning books to movies and how they stand up to the original. Um, let's bring Jim in.
Hey Johnny, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
All right, man. How you doing? I
Good.
know I butchered your intro, man. I'm
No,
horrible
no, that was
with it,
perfect.
I
That's the
guess.
best one I've ever had.
I'm sure you've had better. So, Jim, where did you draw on for your books? What inspiration did you draw upon there? Uh, Former authors or whatever.
Well, I think as a writer, your voice. They also like to talk about your voice as a writer, and your voice comes from all your experiences in your life and all the education you've had and all the books you've read and all the things you've done. When I was a boy, I grew up in a neighborhood with a lot of other boys, and we would just spend entire days just running around playing crazy things like Lost in Space, and a garbage can would be a shield, and a stick would be a sword, and so my imagination as a boy just went in that direction. I watched all the shows like you. I know you're a fan of Lost in Space, and all those shows, Mission Impossible, um, and then when I got into high school, two things happened. One was I decided I was going to go. I was good at both English and math. I was one of those rare people, but I saw which direction do I go, and I chose English. And I was also, that's just when Stephen King was coming out. It was like Salem's Lot and Carrie. Um, and I just love Stephen King. So I decided in my junior year in high school that I was going to become a famous novelist and make $75 million. Which in today's dollars is about 300 million probably. Um, and so then I thought to myself, well, the first book isn't going to make you $1 million. So what am I going to do to support myself until I do hit the big book? And so I decided to become a journalist. So I went to college, USF, South Florida, in Tampa, became a journalist, started working at the St. Pete Times. And around age 20, I wrote a book. It was called Sarah's Curse, and it was sort of a Stephen King type book, and it didn't get published, but I didn't really care because, again, as I say, it's usually the second, third book, whatever. Well, then I got married, started raising kids, working 50-hour weeks at the St. Pete Times, and 25 years later, there was no second book. But all during that time, I began envisioning this character, this Death Wizard, which my series is named after. And when I would go to bed at night, when I was driving, anytime I was thinking, I would just imagine scenes and imagine this character. And finally, I got lucky. We moved up from the Tampa Bay area to upstate South Carolina about 16, 17 years ago. And I was able to take 3 years off. We made a killing out of a golf course house in Florida. When I was able to take 3 years off, I decided, well, okay, it's now or never. I can't use work as an excuse anymore. And so I just sat down. And first thing I did was I read about 75 nonfiction books on everything from medieval armor to horses for dummies, and anything like that. And then I sat down and I wrote all 6 books in 3 years.
Wow.
I then got it published. I was lucky enough at the same time that I was finishing my books is when the publishing industry started to fall apart and the economy started to fall apart. And so it was very difficult for a no-name author to get published. If I'd written this series, to be honest with you, back say in the 1980s, I probably would be a millionaire right now. But times changed. But I got lucky enough to get with a mid-sized publisher called Bellbridge Books, based in Memphis, run by a bunch of New York Times best-selling authors, actually, and did pretty well. I mean, it wasn't enough to raise a family of 5, but it was certainly, it did pretty well and sold pretty well. And at the very least, when you get down to the bottom line, it's like the writing is the most important thing. It's not whether you get published or get successful. Well, in a way, that's kind of bullshit, but it starts out that way, and maybe it comes full circle and it ends that way. So, when I go to my grave, I can look in the mirror and say, at least, I realized my dream.
Yes, you absolutely did. I would dream just to have what you've written in my head. I've always wanted to be able to put that what's in my head onto paper like you do,
Right.
you know, and it's a job. It's
Right.
really a job. It's not something you do lightly, man. I've sat down. I've tried to put 10,000 words down in a day and keep it continuous with leaving the house, doing other things, coming home, and then trying to put it back together again. It's
Right.
that's difficult, man, because your everyday life influences what you're thinking and what you're feeling and what you're going to write,
Right.
you know, and trying to keep that in order. And I looked for mistakes. I tried to find mistakes in your series, man. I really did, and I could. Continuity of the story just it flows, man. It's so seamless.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I had a great editor. She is also a New York Times bestselling author. Her name is Pat Van Wee, and she wrote under a pen name. So it was quite, I've been edited a million times for newspaper articles and other things like that, but I'd never been edited by a professional editor who specializes in novels. And that was a whole different experience. And overall, a great experience. She did a few things I wasn't happy with, but that's always going to be the case with between an editor and a writer.
All right. Since we're doing movies from books, how would you envision the Death Wizard Chronicles if that was turned into a movie or series?
Well, that's a great question, but probably don't have a great answer. And what I mean by that is to make my series into movies or an HBO, series or whatever would cost several $100 million, just like Lord of the Rings did, just like Game of Thrones did. You know, we have a friend, my wife and I have a friend, it's my wife's friend, who I also know. Her name is Janice Ray. She's a nature writer. And she recently published her first novel. She's written a bunch of nonfiction, and she's quite well known. And it's about really more like a novella. It's called The Woods of Fannin County. It's about about the 1940s, these 8 children were abandoned by their mother in a log cabin in the mountains, just left to survive on their own. That is the kind of thing, a 200-page book that would make a fantastic movie that you could make for, a reasonable price. So I guess I've sort of condemned myself in that way, unless the series had become a bestseller like George R. R. Martin or something. It'd be very difficult to make into a movie. It would take, because the special effects would be very expensive.
You do have other books out that standalone. I know you have a children's book out, right?
Oh, yeah, I have a coming of age book, 12 and up, kind of a epic fantasy. I have a X-rated ghost story that was with a publisher and was doing quite well, but the publisher went out of business. So I still am looking for a home for that. And then I have some other works going on.
That's interesting. I've read your books since you put them out there, and I've loved them.
Thank you.
I've visualized that, and I would love. It's just same with the comic books that I used to read. I always visualized them and wanted to see those on the screen. And now with the graphics and everything they have now, it works pretty well. It's even if they don't follow a story, which that's the key here is following the storyline. Should books and movies have the same storyline? Or do you think Hollywood's right in changing the storyline so that you're not just rewatching something that you read?
Right. Well, I think the point to that is when you read a book, your imagination becomes part of it. So in other words, you picture the characters in your mind, you picture the scene. When you watch a movie, it's just there. What you see is what you get.
Right.
So I think that's one of the reasons why most of the time people will say the book was better than the movie, or people say that I didn't picture the character looking that way, or I didn't, so you bring up a good point that maybe deviating is not a bad idea. And in fact, if you started to list some movies that were obviously better than the book, for instance, Blade Runner, the movie, the original Blade Runner was much better than the book it was based on, and it was also much different. So that's a good point.
Yeah, because the book becomes part of you.
Right.
It's you influence the book by reading it, and your own imagination creates its own world.
Right.
That you can't duplicate that. You say you got a book that sold 1 million copies, you got 1 million different variations on that book
Exactly.
just right there. So
Exactly. And the other side of that, which is just as important, I believe, is that books don't have time constraints. So, for instance, a movie is going to be an hour and a half to 3 hours, most movies,
yeah,
and they have to cram it all, what they can cram into it. Well, you have to do that with a book. So, therefore, the book becomes much deeper, much more complex. You look much more psychological in terms of the characters. Um, so, it's, that's why Peter Jackson had to make 9 hours worth of movies to even try to get 20% of Lord of the Rings in.
right, right. And now that they've decided to break all these up into smaller portions and give us a larger format with the series. I mean, you got 6, 7, 10 hours of show that can break that down better. So
I think it works better that way, don't you?
I agree. I'm far more into this series than a 2 hour or 3 hour movie.
Right.
But
The Game of Thrones was what, 11 seasons, I think.
oh yeah, it was.
And it was true. I thought it was tremendous. So.
It was. It gave you the full story that they wanted to tell.
Right.
Well, and Martin had all the influence in that, so he put it out there the way he wanted to put it out there. So what you got was what he wanted you to have. So
exactly.
agree with that however you want to. Also, so I know a lot of people were disappointed in the ending, which I was disappointed, but I liked the twist. It was a twist that I didn't see anybody in the chats coming up with that idea. I didn't see any of that stuff. And I'm pretty sure Martin was watching that also. Do you think that's
a literal twist too, not just a figurative twist?
Right. Do you think that's a good idea that authors watch the chats and try to develop their story based on that? Like, he didn't want anybody to guess what he was doing, right?
Right.
So he would watch the chats, he'd watch the internet, all the social media and stuff, and make sure that he wasn't doing anything that they were predicting. Is that a good idea?
It could be. I've never really thought of it that way. I think most writers, when it comes to writing a book as opposed to making a movie, directing a movie, or screenwriting or producing, most authors of novels, all they care about is their idea. They don't care about anybody else's idea, and so that's the way they're going to write it. Now, if I were then helping to oversee my books become a movie, though, probably have a good point there.
All right, man. I guess we can get on to some other topics here. Let me bring Dylan in here. Hello, Dylan.
Hi, guys.
Whoa, you don't be yelling.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell. I just I've been waiting for a moment here because there was a lot of things that I wanted to add without interrupting. And the first and foremost was the inspiration and the whole talking there. Dude, you're amazing. You're going to inspire the next generation of people to write the way that your figures inspired you. And I love who you picked as figures. I've been sitting here watching, waiting. Just I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. Everything that you guys have said has been amazing. And Jim, you are like one of my heroes. As somebody that's kind of in your shoes, maybe when you were in your 30s, I'm not going to say in your shoes, but in the same ballpark. I aspire to be someone like you. And I know that you're not Stephen King. I know that you're not George R. R. Martin or JLL Tolkien or JKK Tolkien or whatever. But to me, J.R.R. Tolkien, sorry, you're right. J.K. Rowling is the name I was thinking of. But either way, to somebody like me who likes to read the indie books, the indie comics, the indie comedy scene, the indie sci-fi scene, you're an inspiration to people like me.
Well, thank you.
Like, you really are. The way you write, the way that you think through your stories, and what you were saying earlier, if you did, the prequel, it wouldn't be till like book 7 or something. That is beautiful. that is something that means that you have aspirations to finish the series, and not only just get us the story, but the universe.
Yeah.
And for millennial nerds like myself, we don't read for a singular storyline. We read for a multiverse, a whole like history, a prequels, sequels, pre-sequels, like all of it. We want it all. You know, anything that your brain can put out there, and the way that you do it is so I don't want to say flawless, because you know that's a little too much on a pedestal, but it's very, very enlightening almost.
I'd say
You know,
so.
it's inspirational to give you know, a young writer, a young comedian, young podcaster such as myself, something to look forward into growing into. You know,
I appreciate
you're
your thing.
fantastic.
On that scale, I know two people right now that he's inspired to move on. One of them works for Bleeding Cool magazine now, and I don't remember the other kid where he went, man. But after he talked to you, that last kid I sent to you, Jim.
Yeah, that's right. He had
Yeah,
a
he
great
moved on
idea
up too.
for a book.
He moved on up too, and I think he's getting that book published.
Is he really?
Yes,
If you
Oh,
find
man.
out about that, let me know, would you?
I will.
Because he really had a tremendous idea. I thought, man, I wish I had that idea.
I kind of felt like I could have wrote a book a million years ago about my family and my struggles growing up, and like making like my, what do you call it, the fantasy that I made about them
Trust me, you can make a horror movie out of that.
come into life. Yeah, I know, right? But you know, I decided, like, I don't know, maybe I could use that for stand-up comedy. But just seeing you so humble and so open about like your writing process, it's very inspirational, man. You're kind of a gift to the writing community for those of us who read your work.
Wow, thank you. I would say one thing about the publishing industry, and you probably all heard this, is only about 2% of the people, maybe even 1% of the people who write novels can make a living writing novels. The rest of the people, it's sort of like freelance money, or it's you know, just you do it because the love of writing. And I definitely do not fit in that 2% or 1% category. So that'll humble you pretty fast. So,
Right.
And for anybody who cares, which you better care, because this is a great series. Book 1, Forged in Death by Jim Melvin, is still available. Go out there and get it, guys. And the entire series is available also. This is a compendium, or what is it? What would you call it? Three short stories?
yeah, a free short story. There's one called The Black Fortress, one called Rise of the Sun God, and one called Torg's First Death. And they're all short. I think this one's about 30 pages. The other maybe even shorter than that. They're just free things, additional things.
Yeah, it's a great story. When I read that, I thought of it as a prequel. So that's, to me, I think that's the first book you should get. Read this one first, and then go and get Forged in Death. Which,
yeah, just if you do read Black Fortress first, don't judge the series on that, because again, it's just sort of almost an out of context short story.
Right.
I would prefer the reader to go Forged in Death first, and because that's where it goes chronologically. I don't mean to contradict you.
Right. I get it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing really important that you need to know in the Black Fortress.
Right.
I think, although Torg's First Death was pretty, it gives you that first death before you see Torg and stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
And Torg is awesome. He really is. I'll tell you one thing. That is the most unusual, and there's a lot of firsts in your books. Those books. There's a lot of things that nobody has ever written before. Nobody's ever seen anything like this before. I can't say much about that without giving away the plot. I'll tell you the sex scene.
Or put up the spoiler alert before you do.
Yeah, it is an adult series, that's for sure. It's not for your 12-year-old son or something.
Beth Melvin, what was your favorite book to write, Jim?
That's my oldest daughter, Beth.
Favorite book to write? That's got to be a hard question.
My favorite book of the series is book 5, Blinded by Power. So I would say that. Hi, Beth.
Hi, Beth.
So without any spoilers, why was it your favorite to write? Was it something to do with the character development, the foreshadowing for further books, or like the whole political movement throughout the series? What was your favorite part about it?
It was the culmination of the series. Book 6 is sort of like you're over the peak, and now you're sort of going down and wrapping up some loose ends. I mean, it was a good book too, I think, but book 5 just had everything, and most of the really important stuff that culminates in the series is in book 5. There's some great war scenes, and there's that series. If you're into monsters and magic and that kind of thing, I'm much more like Tolkien or like someone like, I don't know if heard of Steven Erikson or Stephen Donaldson, or I'm more like that than I am George R. R. Martin. I mean, there's parts of Martin's series where you almost feel like you're just reading a historical evil.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that way a lot too with reading George R. R. Martin, because it's kind of hard sometimes when like you have so many names and so many objects to focus on all at the same time. It's kind of nice to condense it down from time to time and just get the plot moving.
Right.
Did Donaldson write some science fiction too, space stuff? Space
travel? Yeah, he did. Stephen Donaldson. But his biggest one was the Thomas Covenant Chronicles. The Chronicles are Thomas Covenant. Is that what it was? Yeah. And he was like, his writing was through the roof. I mean, it was just so brilliant. And Steven Erikson, he has a 10-book series called The Book of the Malaysian Fallen that is, his creativity is through the roof. I've never read anyone who has more creativity than he has. But Martin, regardless, the quality of his writing is probably the best I've ever seen in epic fantasy, even better than Tolkien.
Well, I'm gonna say, as a millennial here, that likes to read. Like, I love to read. That's like my passion. But sometimes, man, you don't have to tell me that the red roses were dripping docilely along the dinner hall while the pork was being roasted while King what's-his-fuck like did all this. Like no, just say there were red roses on the table, man. Move on and get to some action. Like, let's go. But I mean, I do like his description. It's great. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, and he is a very, very good writer. But sometimes when you overdo it, it's too much.
You have to visualize it, and I think that's what the authors are always trying to do, is help you visualize what they're saying.
Right. Give me the keywords. Let me go into my own brain and visualize it in my own.
Well, which author were you speaking of just now, anyway?
George R. R. Martin.
Okay.
Yeah, because he likes to tell you everybody's name.
Well, that's because of the influences he had in his writings.
Well, right, which is very fair. But
what makes him great to me is his authenticity. It never wavers. I don't know how he learned all that and how he put it together, but it's just brilliant. I mean, everything from the food, like you say, to the armor, to the fighting, to everything he never has a weak moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you that.
I don't know if you ever read Anne Rice books, man, but not Anne Rice. The Dragon Riders of Pern. That's what I'm talking about. Anne McCaffrey.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever read them, but
I've read them.
World creation. Wait a minute, Don. Her world creation is something that I admired a lot. I think it's the best there is. The creation, the world that she created with Pern. Mm-hmm. I think you pretty much nailed that. And I want to ask you: is that the hardest part of building a society? Is building the society in your world one of the hardest things to do?
Yeah, it is, and that's why I spent so much time doing so much research because, like for instance, I could write a book about a journalist off the top of my head, but I can't write a book about a sword fighter off the top of my head because I've never even picked up a real sword probably. So you have to just read and read and research. I did interviews, a bunch of live interviews. For some of my scenes where they're trekking through the mountains, I went with a naturalist, and Gene, my wife, and I, and he walked through the mountains, and I just asked him every question in the world, from what's that flower to what's that tree to how water flows, everything. And so by the
So
time
my,
I sat down to start book one, I was sort of like a horse ready to go, like I was bucking in the stable.
so what I'm hearing here is that when you have a character that you're trying to write that you don't know so much about, you go and try it, right?
Right.
Yeah, dude,
At least
that's
I try to
amazing.
learn
See,
enough to
that's
where,
why you're an inspiration. Like it's you went out, you looked around, you saw all these things that were in natural elements, and still had like the writer's brain to be like, I know most people would look at that flower and not think much, but that might be
right,
like you looking at that flower might be some foreshadowing later on because he told you that's the cure to poison ivy or something.
right,
So now you can put your character through poison ivy because we foreshadowed the cure to
right.
poison ivy ahead of the time. That's amazing. Like, see, that's what I like to read about.
But
That's that's
if you don't do that, everybody says, well, what do you do about writer's block? Well, that's what writer's block is, when you haven't done that research and you're just trying to make something out of the blue that, you're
well,
not that.
see, like when it comes to the millennial aspect, like you can do all that research online.
Yeah.
I really respect and I feel it influences your writing and the way that you bring your followers in.
There's some
And
things you can't do
I-
online, like texture, the touch,
Yeah,
the
exactly,
smell,
exactly, exactly. Like I really appreciate and respect that. Like you go out and you like really like see how it could help. Like that's fantastic. That's what makes your writing so. I don't know how else to say it. Just, like it's there. It's tight. It's nice.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I think, the theme of the series, I can say is that without being a spoiler, is the Death Wizard. He's called a Death Wizard because he literally can die and feed on death energy and return to life. And the theme of the series is that it's not death that you should fear, but it's living a life of ignorance. And so once you have that theme, then everything expands from that and gets deeper and more complex and more interwoven.
Now, can I ask a question? Does your writing on the way that death works and stuff have anything to do with any sort of like what do they call it, multiverse theory or string theory, as for the ignorance keeps you from knowing how to move between so that you never really die? Like you're not ignorant when you're I guess resurrected or transferred from one universe to another, something along those lines.
Yeah. I think the complexity of the book is defining what ignorance really is. And ignorance it's not ignorance in the literal sense, it's ignorance at a much deeper level. But again, you sort of have to read the book to get that. But I think if you read it carefully, you'll start to absorb it and pick that up.
Okay.
But what you're saying sounds pretty interesting too.
Actually, what he said, I never thought about it before, but he just made me think about that with that one scene that you had close to the end of the book where he is resurrected and the old visuals that you put out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of feels like that. What he was talking about with multiverse, he's just
Well,
out
yeah,
You're right. That's
yeah,
right.
because like if you're ignorant to the fact that your soul lives on, then you just kind of relax and give up. But like if the ignorance isn't there and you are I guess what the kids call it these days, woke,
Yeah.
then maybe you would know that sticking around during your tribulation in between the universes, or it kind of plays into religion too. But I'm a man of science, so
Mm-hmm.
I always go the scientific route, not the religious route. But like, yeah, if you know that if I stick around right now, there's a way I can be resurrected. But it all comes down to what you know, like what your knowledge is. So having a form of ignorance is a way of having death. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you don't know how to take your tools and use them, then
Right.
it'll never be fixed, and you keep going on. Yeah, I really like the way that, like, you know, you do stuff like that. Like it's pretty fun to me, you know.
And then Baphomet comes around and bites your head off.
Oh, Baphomet's not from what I heard, so you don't mess with him.
He's got a bad attitude. I don't blame him.
Dude, I'm going to tell you right now, though, I'm going to try and segue this because Johnny's bad at hosting. So if you're to be made movies, you know, and have that, you know, kind of media attention, what books do you think have been made into movies that have been up to your standard?
I think there's some that are very obvious that are where the movie was clearly better than the book. For instance, Blade Runner was an example. The book was "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep" was the book that Blade Runner was based off of. But
right,
the most obvious example, I think, is Jaws. The book Jaws was a kind of a simple little book by what was it, Peter Benchley, right?
Yeah, I didn't even see that until it came out in the theaters. The movie came out before I ever read the book.
And maybe even the book was written after the movie. I'll have to check on that. But that was a wonderful movie, especially for its time. It feels kind of dated now, of course, but wonderful movie. So Blade Runner is a great example. Forrest Gump, you know, I thought was a tremendous movie. Very good book, but even better movie.
I agree. They found a way with Forrest Gump, because I do have some things to say because I've watched a few documentaries.
That's all right. I got a mute button.
The book of Forrest Gump was kind of all over the place. The movie kind of settled it all down, which made it hit the heart harder, if you will. You know, better, harder, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
They found a way to really condense it down and, you know, make it tug at the heartstrings, as to where the book, like, I mean, so Forrest was in space with a monkey? Like, when did this happen? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So it is pretty cool. And a couple cool things about that, which I didn't think you were going to bring up, but did you know that Tom Hanks read 3 pages of the book and signed on to the movie with no pay?
Wow.
No pay. Right. He said, I'll take residuals.
Yeah, and he made a fortune.
Right, which got the movie funded. Right. And they actually got to make the movie. Same with the casting director and 2 of the producers. They were very into just making it happen.
What's his name?
Tom Hanks.
Hanks. Yeah. I kept he said Tom, and Tom came out of my mouth. Cruise was the second word that was in my head. I couldn't stop it. Yeah, that's a Tom Cruise. See there, Tom Hanks thing again.
But, well, see, this is I didn't mean to, like, you know, take over there with my, like, fun facts, but at Nerd Watch 2020 we keep a 2020 watch on all things nerdy, and
you just blew your promo.
So, you know, that's what we do. So yeah, so it was really cool for that. But I have to agree with most of what you've said so far. But what other books have you think have been made into movies way better than they were books?
Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Very good book. Tremendous movie.
That's an interesting pick. I like that.
See, now I thought the book was better, but
the book, well, yeah,
they were both great.
Right.
to me, like Dune. I love the movie Dune, but man, that series, oh man.
Well, see, Dune's one of those that I feel should have one of their own streaming sites do like 10 seasons of a show about Dune, because that's the only way you're going to get the full story out.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the only way you can get the first book out, man.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly.
9.
Exactly.
Yeah. The original movie I thought was terrible, but
It's a cult classic, so I can't say it's terrible.
I'm holding on to the sequel or the remake because it looks like they're going to, because you know where they stopped. They stopped in the middle of the damn book, right?
Right.
So it seems like they're going to try to get this right. And
Yeah.
I liked the beginning. I liked the first movie that they put out now.
yeah, I did too.
I have a question for both of you that I want to ask real quick. What do you think is better, making a movie about a book or making a like HBO quality series out of a book?
Right now, I'm with the series.
What do you think, Jim?
I think for anything that has a large scope, the series is better. I mean, if it's a shorter, like that one book I mentioned earlier, that 200-page book, that would be probably better as a movie.
Yes.
Right. See, exactly. So, but like for something as a series, I feel like you need that 10 episodes, hour-long episodes, like story to really fit in all of your creative design. So
And that takes me back to Jim Melvin's books because
he'd have to have
are made for a series because you could just
you could have a whole
finishes
on one book.
Especially if he finishes it. I had to poke him a little bit.
Well, I do think the series is finished. It just has paths that could go in other directions too. But I mean, I feel like it's finished. It just has more to offer if I can do it.
I can see a 7th book there, Jim, for real, because the ending and that island is just that other land.
Yeah,
They're open and waiting, and that could lead into a different direction. But that one book needs to sit there to give that push, either end it there or to end it at the 7th book with something happening there, or them. Even then it could continue. So
that is what I mean when I was thinking about a book 7. That's exactly what I was going to do. I don't know. Have you and I talked about this before? Did you
yes,
just
we have.
Oh, okay.
Many times.
Okay. I was going to say, it seems awful familiar because that's exactly what I was going to do. So,
Well, so that makes me ask one more question is, so when I guess because it's my biggest problem when I'm like writing or like trying to figure out a stand-up set or anything like that, I'm bad at endings. So are your endings more leave it open to the imagination, or here's the ending, or here's lines for it to be continued further if I ever find myself back in that universe? How do you like to end books?
I'm sorry. In the series, the endings, except for the book 6, are all cliffhanger endings.
Right.
And then book 6 is a wrap up. Everybody's happy. You just go home kind of ending. So, writing endings to me is by far my favorite part of writing. For one thing, you finally finish the dang book. But for another thing is when all the emotions that you have within you build up to the point, and maybe a silly thing to say, but every time I wrote an ending for all 6 books, I cried as I was writing it. I don't know if that's true. A lot of writers or not, and I had one certain song, Sade's, Jewel, I think it's called, Pearl. Sade's Pearl would be the music I would play when I was writing the last, say, 100 words, and so of all 6 books.
Okay.
Wow.
I like that. I really like that. I find it hard to end things. Like, like I have this universe and I know I'm going to come up with more ideas, but, I'm trying to live with my real life and do my own thing. Like, I hate ending stuff, man. It's hard for me.
Yeah, that's everybody has. Some people it's hard to get started. Some people it's hard to write the ending. For me, the ending's the easiest part. That comes boom.
I kind of feel that you left that one open to if you ever wanted to get. I know at the time you were going to Clemson at the time, right? You were switching over to Clemson and
right.
working there, and you had a lot of stuff going on in your life. So I understood all that. I feel like you left that open so that you'd have something to come back to.
Right.
I really do.
Real quick, I know this isn't a sports show, and I know you went to Clemson for an academic reason, and that's great. But go
He's a
Gators.
Florida State fan.
Go Gators.
You're a Gator fan. I'm actually a Florida State fan, but
Oh no, get out of here with that.
when Clemson was paying my salary, I became a Clemson fan at least while I was there.
No, while you're there, that's fair. No, dude, I get it. I'm just go Gators. That was my thing.
He's also a Bucks fan.
Oh well, then you're okay. You're fine.
I'm
You're
actually
the same person.
the Bucks are like 99%, and all other teams are 1% to me. So all other teams I root for could lose. If the Bucks win, I'm happy.
This is the guy who has to walk away from the TV so he don't have a nervous breakdown during the game.
I feel that. I'm a Bucks and a Broncos fan. I have one from each division. That way, if they play each other in the Super Bowl, I don't care. Either way, I win. I like to play both sides of the field.
All right. Whose books? Here's one for both of you. I'm going to ask this for both of you. Jim first and then Dylan.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Give me a writer who you believe their stories or their poems or their books have been transitioned into movies the best. And you can go by amount also if you want to, because I know Poe's in there with the amount of stories that's been turned into shows.
Right. Well, there's some obvious ones like J.K. Rowling, and as you mentioned, Edgar Allan Poe has had many movie adaptations. Stephen King, I was surprised. I was looking at today. Stephen King has had more than 50 movies made.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that come off the top of my head right now. How about you, Dylan?
I'm going to say Brian Lee O'Malley with Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I'm going to say H.P. Lovecraft with two different forms of media here. I'm going to say Color Out of Space. I thought it was a fantastic movie. They couldn't have casted it better. It was fantastic. But when we go back to H.P. Lovecraft here with the other form of media, I'm going to say Magic the Gathering. Have you guys ever heard of the H.P. Lovecraft Shadows over Innsmouth?
Yes.
Okay, well, they made a Magic the Gathering set, which it taught everybody the lore and all the stories and stuff, but in a way of a card game that everybody liked. It was called Shadows over Innistrad, and it was all about how the Eldritch gods came and invaded the world and really took over and took your favorite universe that you used to know in Eldrazi and Cthulhu and tentacle monsters and weird swamp things, and it was really cool, and it really incorporated that form of media in a very positive way. When I look at an author influencing pop culture, I don't necessarily feel that it's just movies and TV shows. A lot of the times I feel that it influences everything else, like how games are formed and stuff like that throughout their influence.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes down to it, I think the most perfect person to ever influence all of pop culture has to be H.P. Lovecraft or Edgar Allan Poe.
Lovecraft's illustrations, I think you can add the art world to, because his illustrations changed the art.
Well, I mean, even when it comes down to War of the Worlds, those were all aliens based off of the H.P. Lovecraft based models of the Eldritch gods. It's been a big influence since before I was born. Right. And the fact that it's still relevant now that I'm 30 just means that it was a perfect genre.
Well,
Mhm.
he influenced people long before you were born, man. Long
Well,
before
that's
I was
what I'm
born.
saying. Way before I was born, and now that I am here and I'm getting old, it's still reaching my kids. Like that's how you influence a culture, you know?
Mhm.
And he really took that like I don't know what to call it other than eldritch because that's what he called it. Eldrich, eldritch. That eldritch horror will last long after all of us. And I know you guys are a little, older than I am and stuff, but even from where I stand, that eldritch horror is always going to have an influence throughout time. I think he was the most perfect author to ever exist.
I think of it as cosmic horror. Is another
Well,
way to
right,
describe the genre.
cosmic's a good thing too, but
That's
you
actually
can also
a
take
great
the
term.
space out of it and make it here with
Mhm.
some of the characters that he's written and stuff. He's great.
I like that. I like that cosmic. I like that. That's going to be a term I start using.
I mean, he's the guy who brought it tentacle monsters and all this crazy stuff in that everybody else played off of, and sort of in the same way that Tolkien jump started epic fantasy. I mean, there was some epic fantasy written before him, but once Tolkien became popular in the 70s, that's when it all took off again.
He was writing these for his kids. Can you imagine kids telling these stories to your 3-year-olds and stuff at the time?
I mean, yeah, because I do. I'm a weird parent. I'm gonna teach you about the scary stuff so you're not scared of anything. But dude, when we go back to
The war
he had wolves, he had werewolves and witches
Yeah.
and vampires, like all that, like just kind of like adds into it. Plus, he had his own signature big scary tentacle monsters.
Right.
Like he's great, man. I think he'll last throughout the times.
Tolkien was influenced a lot by World War One.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's why
What about
get
you,
this
Johnny?
great
What are your
battle scenes.
picks?
Oh man, everything that you guys have said.
Mhm.
For my favorite picks have not been movies to TV yet. I the ones I dream about, like Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern. I dream about that. And now we've seen Game of Thrones. We know they can make dragons realistic.
Mhm.
Okay. So come on, man. Give me Pern, please. Please give me Pern.
Dude, if I wrote about the things I dreamed about, we'd have a whole new genre called What the Fuck.
Well, that's the thing. That's the point. That's why. All right. For example, Jim, you told me one time how to write. You said you come home and you sit down and you don't get up until you write so many words. How many
Right.
words do you write where you're writing at a session?
Say it again. What was the question?
How many words would you come home and sit down and write?
I said 1,500 words was my minimum, but I was writing 7 days a week, and some days I'd hit 2,000 or whatever. So total to about maybe 40,000 a month. So in about 3 months, you got 120,000 words, and there's your book.
There you go.
And then I would spend the next 3 months editing it and revising it probably 15 to 20 times. And I had all these different tricks as to how I would revise. Sometimes I would I'd make the font twice as large or make it real small, or I'd read it out loud, or I had all these different tricks, or I'd do it on paper. So yeah, but if you're just writing something short, you can write here and there. But if you're writing something long, my series is around 800,000 words. You better have some discipline and a calendar that you follow, because you'll never finish it if you don't.
Well, can I ask, do you think that the timeline made you either A, more anxious while you were writing, or B, make you just write what you weren't really feeling to meet your timeline?
As I said before, even though I had gone from age 20 to 45 without writing the second book, which became Forged in Death, excuse me, I had thought about it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours. So when I actually sat down, once I had finished I spent about 2 or 3 months doing my big batch of research. And once I finished that, when I started writing it, it was almost like I was channeling it. It just sort of poured out of me, and I hardly even had to think in some regards.
Did it ever feel like a chore though? Like
Oh,
I
yeah,
have
I mean,
to sit down and I
Yeah.
have to write 1,500 words. And
it's funny, scenes that are action packed, you write really fast, and scenes that are really slow, you write really slow. That's just the way it goes.
yeah,
And
no,
writing sex scenes, I've been asked before, well, do you get excited when you write a sex scene? Well, no, because you're writing one sentence at a time, as there's no excitement to it at all. You're just trying to create the most vivid sex scene that you can.
fair enough.
I've been known to be vocal about sex scenes in movies, especially in action movies.
Me
where
too.
they stop in the middle of
Me
a
too.
damn scene, have sex while everybody's hunting for them, beating their doors down and stuff.
Or
And it's like, how does that come out? Because yours, albeit there was action going on around, but yours usually happened natural. It seemed like in a natural phase instead of like a forced sex. Oh, we got to put a sex scene here.
right, because it's like in the middle of zombie.
Let him answer the question. Wait a minute. Let him answer the question. How did you?
I was just going to say the sex scenes were part of the linear narrative. So, I mean, it wasn't just like everything stopped and somebody had sex and everything started up again. The sex scene played a role in the story.
Right. A crucial role at that. Yeah.
See, and that's why I feel like in certain scenarios, like, in a horror movie or something, like your adrenaline's pumping so much, like you got to get it out. But like when it comes to like Spider-Man and shit, like
that did not come out.
Wait a minute, your Spider sense is going off. And like you do, but like, hold on, let me bust the nut real quick, and then I'll come save you. Like they're like, come on now, like let's get to it, But like. I have to agree with Johnny. The way you did it, it felt real natural. Sometimes in Game of Thrones, I feel like it's natural. Sometimes I feel like it's very forced and very like whatever. But at the same time, there's a political view to it in certain scenarios to where it's like, oh yeah, the queen was sealing a deal while another deal that she did played off for like an alibi.
Right.
And you can write deeper into that.
I think Game of Thrones is purely based on the royal family, and basically that's how it was for kingdoms and stuff. You got to produce an heir. You got to produce an heir. You got to produce an heir. But Jim's, the difference between that and Jim's is literally a main. The sex scene in Jim's stuff is literally a part of the book, a part of the whole story, and it's crucial. It's crucial. If you don't, if he doesn't explain that or show that in his book, you would never guess that and understand the power there.
Yeah, thanks. I definitely caught some grief for some of the sex scenes. You never know who you're going to offend. Some people are like, they're like, what sex? And other people are like, oh my God, it's the worst thing in the world. So anytime you write adult content, you open yourself up for criticism from some people.
Right. How would, in your books, that's a crucial element to your book.
Right.
Just to show the power of his power,
Right.
I was amazed, I was knocked out that you did that to that person at that time, so early in the story. I was like, what?
That's another criticism.
One more thing that I wanted to ask you about your writing process that will help me with my writing process in a weird way. Do you ever try to incorporate like the real world politics that are going on into your books, or is it all just fantasy as an escape to the real world?
In the case of my series, I would say the latter. My wife is a Western convert Buddhist, and she's taught me a lot of things about Eastern philosophy that I just found fascinating, that I thought fit well with the book. So there is, I guess, a religious element in that regard, but it's not a supernatural. It's more of a philosophical,
Right.
and it's sort of part of what the book makes the book interesting and different from other books, I think. So but otherwise, it's not really allegorical. I'll probably lose some sales just saying this, but I tend to be on the liberal side of things politically, and that shows a little bit in the series too. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's hard to take your beliefs out. Like if you believe that that nature and our planet is imperiled, it's going to show in your writing.
Right.
So are your own viewpoints about life.
That's kind of what I was asking there, because do you want to write a shocking scene that would be against what you feel that would be shocking to the world, or is it more like I just kind of try and go more towards what I know without necessarily preaching it, if you will? You know what I mean?
Got some shocking scenes in your books, man. That's for sure.
Well, right, but I guess I was just asking: is it more of an escape, or is it more of let me get my viewpoint out there?
I think for people who just read for the enjoyment of the story, it's that, and people who read deeper is that too. So it's not going to bore people who just like the story, but it's not going to bore people who like something deeper as well. And that's one of the things about writing. One of the most important things is you can't, if you're going to use symbolism and all the different literary elements, they have to be hidden between the lines. You can't just shout them out,
Yeah, I really like that answer. I really do. Yeah, that makes you.
The flow of the story is not impacted by the political sides of it. That's
right.
Oh no, I mean I know that
it can be. You can go that way. I could see that very easily.
I guess
in light of our political situation now, and reading that book, we can see the correlation. But you wrote the books way before this system was here or in place or whatever, So you can take whatever you want to take from the books.
I think the series is just more socially liberal, and they're in terms of respect, things like respect for women and all people are equal, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I
was just curious because with my writing and the things that I say, I wrote a joke the other day that I think I'm gonna add to my stand-up routine, but it's a little I don't know, that was kind of edgy. But it's I'm here to make you laugh. I'm not here to talk politics.
Right.
I'm not here to do all that. I'm here to escape from my life and talk about yours for a while, And, I've had a few science fictions, things like that I've wanted to write, but I didn't know what the relevancy should be between my escapism and my actual life, I guess is what I'm trying to, and my own beliefs and stuff. So it's really cool to hear a successful writer say, I leave it open to interpretation. Yes, I have my beliefs, but I don't necessarily put them into my escape. It's there for your interpretation, and it's kind of inspiring in a way.
I don't think you can get bogged down in all the politics or that. You just have to have a story and write it.
Well, see, I think about Game of Thrones and stuff, and it's very political at times.
Right, and that's what he was writing a story. I don't think he was. Those elements are going to be in the story, like Jim said a while ago, because that's who he is.
Right.
Just write from who you are.
Right.
And I think but the problem is you can talk about writing and you can think
see if you think about what he's doing with House of Dragons and even what he did with Game of Thrones with Cersei's power and stuff, he always likes to put a woman in charge and watch the world fall around that. like fall apart around that, because it's like, is he writing that he thinks that if a woman's in charge, the world will fall apart? Or is it because he's trying to call everybody out and be like, bruh, having a woman in charge might not be that bad. Like, it's kind of interesting to think about it when you read deeper. So to hear an actual author talk about how he puts that into his own writing is really influential and inspiring. It's really nice to hear.
I think the women in Jim's stories are pretty powerful.
Yeah, they're pretty badass.
An example, Johnny, is some of the most dangerous warriors in my series physically are women.
Right.
That to me is respectful to women, because normally in most of fantasies is a big strong man and the helpless little women, unless they're witches or.
So you're leveling the playing field.
Right.
And that's beautiful, but you're not doing it with any other intention of saying like, this is kind of my escape and this is what real world's like. So let's talk about if they did it, like that's really nice to hear,
Right. That's exactly right.
I got one question. Who would you cast as Torg? Your dream.
Yeah, I want to hear that too, actually. Can I second that? Please tell me.
Yeah, I've given that plenty of thought. The problem is, as you know, the Torg is the king of this race called the Tugars, and the Tugars are all quite large. They're like 7 feet tall. So
big brutes.
Can't be immediately. Tom Cruise is gone, as we discussed earlier. But
no, because we have CGI and stuff these days, so you can make them up. Because Tom Hardy, I think, is the biggest.
I'm not thinking either one of them. I'm thinking.
Well, but either way, Tom Hardy.
Who's the guy who played Thor again? What's his name?
Hemsworth.
What's that?
Hemsworth.
Yeah. I'd probably pick him.
Yeah,
I'm surprised you would go with The Rock.
I thought he would go with Jason Momoa, to be honest.
Well, Momoa would, he would also be good. I've thought of him.
He's got that big brute. He's got the indescribable race, he's just big brooding fucker.
I take it.
I throw a native at you, but I don't think we have any native actors that would fit that role.
Yeah.
not the size wise.
Yeah.
Shaq would be too goofy.
Yeah.
So I wanna ask one question to both of you. I want you both to answer one at a time. So roll a d20 and see who goes first. What is your favorite Edgar Allan Poe poem?
Oh, that's easy.
All right. Well, since you said it's easy, Johnny, tell us. And Jim,
I know this is cliche because, all right, there's a couple of them. The Telltale Heart and The Raven. Those are beautiful stories.
all right. Which one would you put as number one?
I can't.
When you do, tell me why.
I can't tell either one because they're to me.
So tell me about both and tell me why you like those both.
I can't tell you about Telltale Heart without giving the whole damn story away because it's basically.
Bro, it's like 200 years old. If you need a spoiler alert at this point, get out from under your rock and read a fucking.
I'm trying to get people to read. Okay, I don't.
No, I'm saying other people. You don't need spoiler alert. Just fucking tell me why you like it.
Well, why would I tell somebody a whole story instead of getting them to pick up a book?
Well, because if they haven't already done that, they need.
Trust me. Go get a book of Poe, and choose your own favorites.
So you're gonna say the Telltale Heart or the Raven? Is it because there was always that looming factor over you, saying that you're not doing everything you could?
That's Poe's trademark.
Well, not necessarily. If you think about Annabelle, me and my Annabelle. Oh, fuck. What's her movie?
You asked my favorite. You didn't ask your favorite.
Well, no, I'm just saying. It's kind of this. There's a difference.
No, to me, there's not. To me, it's always something. There is a looming factor in everything Poe did, or he wouldn't be Poe.
Okay.
Jim, your turn.
I mean, the one that stands out the most to me is The Pit and the Pendulum, and that was actually a pretty good movie too. So,
Speaking of something looming.
Well, okay, so what did you like about that? What made you like relate to that so much?
well, what I think what does the pendulum symbolize? And that's what I was talking about earlier. You sort of start out with a theme and you expound upon it. The that idea of the pendulum to me was just fascinating, and this is the whole story based around it. But I do have to admit, I read everything but Poe ever wrote back in high school and college. I probably haven't read much Poe since then.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I've slacked on the Poe.
Yeah.
Well, see, I've been reading a lot of Poe because, again, as I talked about earlier, me and my daughter we get through the compendium every night, and I let her pick one. I really like the story about the cat.
Which daughter? Wait a minute, Charlotte.
No, Isabella. But please quit using real names on live. Um, yeah, she's my nerd. She's the one that's gonna be like a writer and talk about like all the bullshit in life. Like she's gonna be great. She watches a bunch of anime, the whole nine. Anyways, but yeah, every night. But I like the one about the cat, and I can't remember exactly
Black cat?
the name of it. I don't think it's called the. Oh, it is called the Black Cat.
Yep.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. And we have a black cat, which is why she wanted to read that. So it's all about this cat that his wife picked up, and he hated the cat, but for some reason, like it had like a fascination with him.
Mhm.
So every night he'd come home drunk, and in the midst of infidelity and the whole nine yards, and that cat would just look at him and meow and just like judge him. And it was great. And he got fed up one night and he accidentally killed the cat. And it was an accident, but he did kill the cat. And then he buried it in the basement. And then, life went on, the cat ran away, everything's fine. And then one night, him and his wife get into the same type of argument, and he accidentally kills her and puts her right next to the black cat. And the cat, and he got away with it. He got away with it. Everything was cool. And the cat started coming and visiting him and telling him that, like, basically it was an interpretation of his guilt. And I think that was a very, very nice personification. And the cat ended up like sitting on his chest one night when the house was burning down. And the house burnt down and everybody got out safe. And there's this big like silhouette of the cat in the like bedroom where the candle fell. And that's how the cops caught him and everything. And it was all like, you should have never hurt me to begin with. And we would have never got here. And I think it's a beautiful story. I think it's a story about being open and honest with your partner and actually like being yourself and finding what you need in life, not what you have in life. I thought it was a beautiful poem. But yeah, it's fantastic. It's all about like that, taking it too far. And why you should never. Like, I think he's also a great author in leaving it up to interpretation on your own influences in life. Taking it how you will.
That's very well put.
Thank you.
Let's try some new stuff.
Some new stuff.
Let's try some new stuff. Jordan Peele.
Oh, I love him. I love him so fucking much. I actually just watched Nope the other day, and it was very Lovecraftian.
All right. Jim, have you seen any or watched any Jordan Peele?
No, I haven't.
It's really, I think he's Jordan Peele. As far as comparisons go, you can't really compare him to anybody. The closest I would do would be, the guy that did The Village and stuff.
M. Night Shyamalan.
Shyamalan.
Johnny, on that note, I was going to bring this up earlier, and I waited because I was waiting for somebody to bring him up. We would not have the new Twilight Zone if not for Jordan Peele.
Right,
He
right.
has a very Hitchcock, Lovecraftian way of thinking of things. And his movies have been great. Nope was awesome. It was really good.
I didn't expect that from him. I thought it was going to be another one of those. I don't even know how to classify him.
He's another weird one, man. Like,
Yeah, yeah, he's really not classifiable. If you classify Jordan Peele, you're just going to have to put him in the Jordan Peele class. It's very unique.
I'm gonna put him right back into the Lovecraft scene.
I don't want to. Yeah, Lovecraft has been influential, but Peele has went beyond what Lovecraft does mentally. He attacks he gets your thinking, and I like anybody that gets you thinking.
What else has he done?
He did Get Out,
Get out, yeah,
Us. He did the Key and Peele show, so that's where he started. It was his comedy. He did all of the Twilight Zone, the reboot that they did. He wrote every episode. He has a very unique way of thinking. If he rebooted X Files, I would watch it.
Mm,
I'll put it that way.
yeah,
If he rebooted X Files, I would watch it.
oh, I'd love to see a reboot of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I loved X-Files.
Jordan Peele has been amazing, and I after Get Out, I was giving him some time because I really didn't know what I felt about that movie.
Get Out was awesome. I think Get Out was awesome. It was actually my favorite, except for Nope. Us was cool, but it was Get Out
You
and
crazy?
Get Out, High and Tracy, Get Out and Nope were his two best. And his Twilight Zone has been very good. Like there was a couple episodes that creeped me out, like as a millennial. Like you know what I mean? Like he took that feel because I grew up watching, the Twilight Zone.
Rod Sterling,
Yeah, and his was just so good.
yeah,
It was so
it
good.
is. I first watched his Twilight. It's not that new. It came it's been out for like.
Last year or the year before, maybe during the pandemic. I can't
Well,
remember.
he had a hand in the first try at it too. I think he was a writer on that, and I wasn't that impressed with the whole. It collapsed if you remember correctly, and now the new one is he's in charge, and it's very very good. It's very comparable to Rod Sterling stuff as far as originality and all the whole theme. I love it. It's really good. That was what was missing from the first attempt. What was that back in the 80s or early 90s?
No, it was like late '90s because it was after I was born. They tried to reboot the Twilight Zone.
Right.
It sucked. It sucked.
Anyhow, yeah, it was horrible. The originality was not there in the writing or anything like that. They tried to put it out like it was Rod Sterling's, and it just didn't work.
I feel that. All
Anybody
right,
else keep in
fellas.
mind?
I gotta get going off of here.
All right.
But it's been a great pleasure for you guys to have me on the show.
Hold on a minute. Let me put you up so you can say your things. Oh, wrong guy. Sorry, Jimmy.
He's a lot prettier than me. Leave him there. I'll keep talking.
Right.
No, but I've been Dr. Karpenstein from Nerdwatch 2020, where we keep a 2020 watch on all things nerdy. Check out our podcast. It's entitled Nerds on the Watch on Spotify. It's a little sloppy. We're working on getting it better, which is why we're lacking episodes and content. I really had a lot of fun talking to you fellas tonight. Jim, Melvin, I hope that we can do this again without being like on air, because I'd really like to, bounce some of my ideas off of you and hear what you have to say. Otherwise, this has been the Entertainment Review episode 3. I've been on 2 of them, so hopefully I get to be back for number 4. And here's signing off. I'll continue to keep my watch. Later, guys.
Thanks, Dylan.
All right. There we go. Do you have any ideas on new writers that have come out? Have you read anything lately? New lately? Excuse me.
Yeah, he's not necessarily a new writer, but I just recently discovered him myself. A guy named Robert McCammon. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah.
He wrote a book called Swan Song. It's a apocalyptic novel, like post-nuclear war kind of thing. Brilliant. I mean, absolutely brilliant. If you're looking for a good book, go to Swan Song. And Richard Powers, wrote the Overstory. I mean, that's one of the most powerful books I've ever read in my life. It'll wear you out, but it's an amazing book. So those are two of my favorites I've read recently. I'm reading the book version of World War Z,
Really?
which it's a lot different than the movie. The movie was with Brad Pitt, of course,
Right.
and I love that movie a lot. The book is very interesting. This guy goes around, he just interviews all these different people all around the world and what their experience was when the zombies attacked, and that's interesting.
That's a different point of view too.
Yeah, it's very interesting. How about you?
I honestly have been so busy watching shows that I haven't read anything lately. The last thing I read was The Black Sword. I can't even tell you who wrote it. It was the book I saw on the shelf. I picked up and started reading, and it was pretty good. It was pretty good. It wasn't. You didn't have the dragons. You had some other things that were new, but it was the same lines as most fantasy books.
Right.
It wasn't. I wouldn't say it's something to really scream about. It was average. But he got it published, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing for all writers that can get it published, and it wasn't a waste of time. I have read books that were wastes of time. One of the books that I thought was a waste of time. Here we go. You're probably going to yell at me for this one, but The Ring World.
Yeah,
that was a complete waste of time that I can't never get back to me.
Right.
What else was? It's hard to say.
Some authors that some people just absolutely love, like Robert Jordan. I thought Robert Jordan was good, but not fantastic. And
I have to admit, I love Robert Jordan. I love what he did the first book.
Right.
The sequels carried on way, way too long, man.
Right.
And I based it on the first book, I'd love him. But including all the sequels, there's 13 or 14. I think Winterbone was the last one I actually got through, and that was just when I closed that book, I wasn't closing it with that feeling that I just enjoyed something. I closed it with, oh, that's finally done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes some people, like you were talking about finishing something, some people don't. I guess Robert Jordan can't finish.
Right. Stephen Erickson, with no C in Erickson.
Right.
The Book of the Malaysian Fallen is 10 books, I believe, and it's well worth it. I mean, it'll take you half a year to get through them, but they're tremendous.
Yeah, some people can continue a storyline as long as they want to, and the books never lose their luster. Like, I've been talking about her all night. Anne McCaffrey, she passed away, and that was the saddest day of my life when I heard that she passed away. I was like, oh no, what's going to happen now? Her son wrote one or two other books. It was supposed to carry on the legacy, and his writing was really good. It was. I had a feeling he might have found some manuscripts or thrown away copies of stuff that she had started on and just never got to, but it felt really good. And I'd like to see that continue. Who else? Man, there's a lot of series out there that are good. I find how many books do you read before you? For me, I'll read if I pick up 5 books, 1 out of 5 might be that interesting book that grabs my attention.
Right. Well,
Do
for
you
me,
find
if
that?
it's a standalone, I give it 100 pages. If it's a 5-book series, I'll give it about a book and a half
Right.
usually, because you just never know. I'm sure this happened to you before. You're reading along, you're like, this is terrible, this is terrible, this is terrible, and all of a sudden, bam, it'll hook you. And once it hooks you,
Yeah.
you'll finish it.
That was kind of like the first time I read The Hobbit was like that for me.
Mm-hmm.
It really was. I was like, come on, man. And then I got to it, and the storyline finally started grabbing and riding along and stuff, and that was pretty good.
Right.
But I read The Hobbit the first time when I was pretty young. So
Yeah, I read all those back in the 70s. First time I read them blew me away. I've read Lord of the Rings probably 25 times in my life.
Tolkien was a hard read. A Silmarillion was a really hard read at first.
Yeah, that's not even a novel. That's just like reading an encyclopedia or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
But Lord of the Rings, the characters are so rich and so just wonderful, I thought.
Yeah,
I know Jason made some comments in here, and he asked about getting Black Fortress and whether there's a video version. There's not a video version.
Oh, Jason's being a smart ass. He always
is he?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
he's talking about an X-rated video version, which you
Oh.
could probably do that with your books.
Okay. All right.
Man, we've had fun tonight. I've enjoyed it. I mean, we're kind of off topic, but man, you're so interesting. I could talk about this stuff all night.
Thank you. I did not expect us to talk as much about me as we did, but
yeah, I tried. I was going to, but then once it started flowing, it just kind of just took over, man.
Yeah. Well, it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I've also appreciated your support. You're the type of person that really works hard for people, just because you're a nice person.
Yeah, if I enjoy something and I want to share it. I want everybody to enjoy it like I do, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm sure if they pick up your books, there is no doubt they will enjoy it. And if they don't, then something's miswired in their head.
Well, if you have Kindle and you don't mind reading Kindle, you get it for book 1 for 99 cents. So how can you lose? You know, if you hate it, you've lost 99 cents.
I didn't even know Kindle was still around, honestly.
Yeah. Or any electronic version.
Yeah, I like hardcovers. I like
most people do.
Paper in my hand. It's personal, you know?
Right. Yeah, definitely.
And I can't read screens very well. You noticed that when I popped you up instead of Dylan a while ago. I can't see the screen worth of crap. I'm blind as hell anymore. That comes from, you know what that comes from? It's eye strain from reading with bad lighting and reading. That's where I got my eye problems from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, man. Now, one more thing.
Yeah.
And then we'll go. Get on that other book. That dragon is just waiting to breathe fire around here, man.
I think you've inspired me to do that. I'll definitely. Basically, what I need to do is just get started. Once I get started, I'll get on a roll. So it's that getting started part that's been hard for me for some reason.
I know once I get these people interested in your books, and if they get to the end, they're going to want more. I guarantee that.
I would certainly not complain.
It's been nice, people. I know it's been a different type of show than we usually do. I hope you enjoy it because this was the most informative show we put out here so far by a lot. So, we got Mr. Fingers in here right at the end of the show. How you doing, buddy?
Hey guys, sorry.
Hey,
Jim Melvin. This is Anthony Handy. Anthony, this is Jim.
Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
You came in right at the end, man. So
I'm sorry. I was trying, man, but we wound up running late because the guy that Sean produces the show, and his computer crashed, and he spent like a half hour trying to get it up and running, and he finally just gave up and said, "I'll run it from my phone." So we wound up starting a half hour late. I would have been on a half an hour ago.
Oh,
so,
man.
What books did I miss?
You missed everything, man. We talked like the title of the show says. We talked from oh my God, I gotta go read the title of the show now.
You talked about you said you were going to do book to film adaptations.
Yeah, we did from Lovecraft to Hitchcock tonight.
Wow.
Well, okay, now that you're here, can't have you here wasted. What is the best and worst? Give me two. What's the best and worst film adaptations you've seen from book to film?
You know what? We talked about that. I started talking about it last week, and you kind of had me put a pin in it because you wanted me to come on here. But I did say last week that what was it? Green Mile and Shawshank Redemption.
Bingo.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Stephen King fan. Big
Yeah.
Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption, and then as far as worst book adaptations, that's hard for me to say because I don't know. There are a lot of books. There are a lot of movies that are based on books, and I didn't even know they were based on books. But
Well,
again,
just stay within your own.
Staying within Stephen King, The Langoliers. They made a
Oh.
whole 90-minute movie out of The Langoliers, and the best part about it was watching Bronson Pinchot trying to be taken seriously as an actor in a thriller. After 7 years of playing cousin Balky on Perfect Strangers.
Yeah, I have to agree with that.
I think that movies based on Stephen King's writing started out for the first 3 or 4 or 5 movies were all kind of weak, and then suddenly a good one came along, and then they all started getting really good. Like Shawshank was really good, Green Mile was really good. The original Shining.
Oh yeah.
Jack Nicholson's always great, but I didn't love it.
As far as a book adaptation,
Films Lot I didn't love. Carrie was actually a pretty good movie.
Yeah.
Yes. Carrie put the spotlight on King.
Yeah.
I didn't dislike the Dr. Sleep film adaptation, but I couldn't quite get all the way into it either. I think the lady that played Rose the Hat was very good. I can't think of her name off the top of my head right now. And Ewan McGregor is almost a never miss.
Mm-hmm.
But the adaptation itself is. I did like the book.
It wasn't a true adaptation. It was no. They were trying to throw stuff in there that Stephen King wanted in the original movie to keep the. If they'd have remade The Shining with Stephen King and let him put those things in the original movie, I think it would have worked a lot better.
Well, yeah, because my understanding, spoiler alert for any of you still watching, and if you haven't read The Shining by now, too bad. The book's like 40 years old. If memory serves, at the end of The Shining, it didn't end like in the movie it did not end with Jack Nicholson freezing to death in the maze.
No.
He wound up dying in the boiler explosion.
Yep.
Right.
And they brought that back around in Dr. Sleep. So yeah. But
I've read Dr. Sleep, but I have not seen the movie.
It's not, like I said, it's not a bad. If you look at it when you watch it, I think you will agree. And God, it's killing me that I can't think of the actress's name. I think she's British or Australian or something like that. But she does an excellent job as Rose the Hat. She's pretty much kind of exactly like I envisioned Rose the Hat would be.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, Ewan McGregor is almost a can't miss.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely liked the book better than the film. I did find out later on, because I've always wondered why they kept putting out some of these movies based on Stephen King books that just were like, eh.
Well, the Dr. Sleep book was a reverse adaptation. It was adapted from the film.
Was it? The book had been out for a good long
No, the
while.
book came out first.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had the book for about 4 or 5 years before the movie came out. What I was going to say about the King adaptations is Stephen King will basically, if you want to make a film, short or long form, he only charges you $1 for the rights. I don't know if that's changed or not, but at one point he was only charging people $1 to sign over the rights for you to do whatever. And there were some people that were really, a lot of them are like film students that are doing some things, but some of those productions were like, you can see a lot of them on YouTube now. There's about 800 different adaptations of Clyde Umney's Last Case on YouTube, which is from which short story book is that from? 4 Past Midnight.
What's the name of the short story again?
Clyde Umney's Last Case. I'm looking at my bookshelf right now. Nightmares and Dreamscapes, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Yeah, okay. I had that book.
Yeah, some of the best King movies were his novellas, like Shawshank Redemption was a novella.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
1922 was a novella. And sure there's some other examples of that, but
The Green Mile was actually, he released it as a series of short stories.
yeah, like a serial. It was 10 little like 100-page books.
I loved that. I was stationed in Korea when the first one came out. I think it was 96.
He did another one like that too. I can't remember what it was.
Stand By Me was a King.
That was another one, yeah.
Okay. King, is there any person in the world that you can talk about books and King is like in the top 5 of their, if they're mentioning books, King's going to be in the top 5 as soon as they start talking.
Well, this is what I'll say about Stephen King. He took a genre and made it his. I mean, It's not like horror and the macabre didn't exist before Stephen King came along. He took that genre and said, "This is mine." I mean, you've got James Patterson with the Alex Cross novels and the Women's Murder Club novels, but James Patterson is not the master of that realm. He's probably the most prolific writer in that domain, but he's not the master of that realm because David Balducci wrote what is it called? King and something. Is about a retired Secret Service agent, and a private investigator where they saved the president from an assassination attempt. In the they were trying to kill him using the presidential limousine, the Beast. He writes excellent books.
Dean Koontz.
Alex Kellerman. Dean Koontz is kind of along with Stephen King. I think they ran neck and neck for a while, but when you say horror and macabre, Stephen King is always the first name.
Oh yeah, well Dean Koontz went with the medical side of everything. He went with the viruses and this DNA mutations and all that stuff. But they ran neck and neck there for a while. And as far as just putting out volume, these Patterson, Koontz, and King are like
ridiculous.
Yeah, crazy.
And Koontz does something like 12. I've read where he does 10 to 12 hours a day, like 6 days a week or something.
But as prolific, as prolific as those guys are, none of them have anything on Laurie Foster. Although Laurie Foster is known for the cheesy, like 100-page. I mean, she's written some thick ones too. My wife is a huge Laurie Foster fan. But Laurie Foster just puts out book after book after book after book. Sometimes it's like 2 and 3 at a time. So
there was one woman that was there was one person that was putting out books like that, romance books. Those romance books are crazy. You get on any airplane and that's what you're going to grab at the bookstore.
That's what I'm talking about.
No, this was a person who was actually a man writing as a woman.
Oh.
And their books sold millions of copies. I cannot remember what the name of it. The person was. Damn it. That was it. I think it shocked everybody when they found out it was a man that was writing that, and you didn't hear from him no more. But that was the most popular author at one time for romance novels. Oh crap! Let me find the name. You guys can talk amongst yourselves. Let me find this name.
Either one of you guys, I'm sure you have. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do. Just sitting down one night over a beer or whatever and trying to write down your top 10 favorite movies from 1 to 10.
Oh God,
to do that.
Favorite movies, period.
Favorite in terms of how much enjoyment they gave you watching them. And it doesn't have to be like happy enjoyment. It can be, just that was a fabulous, wonderful movie.
Or a movie that just evoked so much emotion in me that whether good, bad, or in the middle, that it will always forever stick with me. I do have a top 10 list. I don't have it written down. I can definitely tell you number 1 on my list is Coming to America. I was an Eddie Murphy fan from the first time I saw him on Saturday Night Live, and he talks about how you would sneak in the basement and listen to the Richard Pryor records. Well, I was the 12-year-old kid who had that aunt that bought me all of Eddie Murphy's. She bought me the Delirious album, and the album before that, the Eddie Murphy album where he did the Buckwheat and Richard Simmons fighting.
I was
Where
like
they
that with
over
Chico.
the yeah, it
Great
was
friends.
Enough is Enough, where they did the parody of the Barbara Streisand song. But when I saw Coming to America, that for me was perfection in terms of Eddie Murphy. It was his comedic genius, and it gave him enough to be raunchy, but not so much to be like to be the raunchy Eddie Murphy raw raunchy, with
Mhm.
his comedic talent and his timing, and then his friendship with Arsenio Hall and how they played off each other. So that's my number one. Also on the list is Forrest Gump, The
Yeah.
Matrix, um, Forrest Gump and The Matrix. Uh, this one, a lot of people are gonna go, huh? But Black Hawk Down,
I love
Black
Black
Hawk,
Hawk Down.
Black Hawk Down, and Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
And then those are the five that I can remember off the top of my head.
The romance thing was, I believe this Nicholas Sparks was the guy who was writing as a woman, kind of like the Bachman books,
Yeah.
but he was ranked one, two, three,
Oh
fifth,
yes,
fifth. Danielle Steele though is crazy. That's the one I was really trying to think about.
Mhm.
Danielle Steele, you can't. She's the top selling romance writer of all time. I mean, they're saying here. Let's see what it says. And Nora Roberts is second. Nicholas Sparks was third, though, and I think they're including his writing as when he was writing as a woman.
I'm surprised I didn't know that because I think my wife told me that because she loves The Notebook. She's like, "You need to watch that with me sometime." I'm like, eh.
Jim, you should have wrote romance novels. They sell
Yeah,
like
I know.
crazy, man.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I'm glad you did. Don't take that seriously because what you've done with Death Wizard and everything you've written, including your editorials and your sports columns and all the way from when you were in with St. Pete Times or St. Pete. It was
Times.
right. Yeah.
Right.
I get that the Trib and the Times mixed up constantly. I moved
Yeah.
to Florida, and everything about Florida has just left my mind.
Well, let me ask you a question, if I may, Jim.
Mhm.
This is my first time ever having an audience with an author. Like, how I always thought, like, people have always told me you should write a book because I've led a fairly interesting life. You know how sometimes people write
Mhm.
books and they just catch on with the American public because you're that every man, every woman, whatever story. How in the world did you always write, or was it something that you did
Um,
later in life, or what?
well, probably the very first thing that has to happen. Here's an example. I had a friend tell me that he's writing a book, and he told me this plot that went on for about 45 minutes, and it was brilliant. And I thought this is fantastic. I said, "Well, how far are you into it?" He said 2 pages. Yes. So the first thing that has my point is the first thing that has to happen is that you have to be able to write, and that starts from middle school, high school, college, all the way up, that you're good at English, that you take a lot of punctuation, grammar courses, that you take, and so you've been writing all along. It's not like you're 25 and you can't write a lick, and at 35 you're a best-selling novelist. So
Right.
that's where most people, when they say I can write a book, they do actually have the ideas that are very good, sometimes better than the ideas that published novelists have. But the process of writing, it's not just a desire. It's a skill set, just like any skill set. Just like being a broadcaster, there's a skill set to that, or being an athlete, or being an electrician.
Yeah. Well,
If you don't have the skill set, you're going to hit the dreaded writer's block, and you're going to just keep starting and stopping and starting and stopping, and you won't be able to do it.
it was not so much that I don't have a problem with writing. It's just
Mm-hmm.
I just like I guess my question is, what is it? Okay, what is it that keeps you motivated to finish a project once you get started with one?
Right.
Because I'm a regular person. I have a 9 to 5. I run a couple of podcasts. I write music on the side. I'm trying to run a small business over here where we sell like different types of apparel, branded apparel. And it's like, how do you find the time? Where do you just dedicate that time where you sit down and do it? And how do you just stay focused on doing it over and over and over again until it's finished?
Yeah, well, I didn't mean to insinuate that you weren't a good writer. I was talking like generics in that regard,
Okay.
but it's it's very difficult under this scenario you're describing. The only way to do it is, in my opinion, is to create a calendar. You're going to say from 8 to 10 in the evening, or from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning. I'm going to write 1,500 words, or I'm going to write 1,000 words, and I'm going to do it 6 days a week. And whether you're sick, whether you have guests, whatever, you stick to it as much as you possibly can. And if you write 1,000 words a day, 6 days a week, that's 6,000 words times 4. That's 24,000 times 4 months. You got a book.
Okay.
If you set your sights lower and you're writing 500 words a day, which you can do in an hour, in a year you get a book. And we know how time flies. A year goes by just like that. So,
Oh my God, I put down 500 words a day more.
yeah,
I put down more than 500 words a day at work because I'm a desk guy.
yeah.
And I write price analyses all day for work.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be, yeah.
Think about how many words you put down in a chat on Facebook or Twitter
Yeah.
in a year. That's a book right there. So
Well, if it was as easy as typing it with your thumbs, everybody would be novelists.
no, I'm just saying, if you, I'm not taking away what Jim said. I'm trying to like improve on that point. If you really want to write, instead of writing in the chats, write on your novel.
Okay.
And I'm not aiming that at anybody. It's just, put it in his perspective about how many words put down a day. Think about it like that. I could be doing this instead of this, and you probably get somewhere that way.
Another thing that helps some people, and again, I'm speaking generically. I outlines are dreadful. They're very difficult to do, and they're so like boring, whatever. A lot of writers, like Stephen King says, he'll start with the first word and just write until he's done. He doesn't have any outline. It develops as he's writing. But I would recommend spending maybe 6 months on an outline, and just making the outline more and more detailed, and chapter by chapter, character by character, have a timeline with it. If you do all that work in advance, as boring as it is, it's still kind of something you could do a half an hour a day here and there. Then once that's done, if you start writing the book, it'll just flow right out just beautifully. So you can write a book from like Stephen King does, but if you have a really powerful, detailed, intricate outline, that's sort of the skeleton within the book, and then all you have to do is write the flesh around it.
Okay.
Yeah, because then you can, in the outline, that's where you put your economics of whatever world you're building into and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I've never got past an outline. I'll tell you that right now. I have tried. I wrote a short story. It got sold when I was 14 years old to Omni Magazine, if you remember that company back in the day. And I got so inspired. I'm going to be a friggin' great writer and shit. And then never got past an outline in a novel. Short stories are one thing. Novels are a whole different story.
Poems. That was my thing, was poems. I wrote poems. I think every young man, at least in our generation, coming up and before, had a crush on. My father told me, you'll fall in love many times before you finally find the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with. Boy, he was never wrong. So I had a poem every time I got a crush on somebody. I had a poem, and they float. God, I wish I knew what it. My mom probably has them somewhere. Some of them were published in like the middle school and in high school journals and things of that nature when they put out their publications every year. I don't know. That was just my thing, was poetry. And I know poetry is a whole lot different now than it was then, but still. And then short stories. And I've always thought about at a minimum writing a book of my life story, so it would be something for my kids to have, as part of their family heritage. So when they have kids, because I don't have any grandkids yet, so I don't know if I'll ever get any, or if they'll come along long after I'm gone. They'll have something to go, this was your granddaddy right here.
I'll give you a couple of mine, man.
I'm good. I'm good. I was talking with a coworker today about grandkids, and she's her grandson's like 2 months old, and she's like, it's a whole different world from having a kid. I said, I tell you why. Because you can love them differently, because you get to watch them grow up. You actually get to watch them grow up, as opposed to having to raise them and watching them grow up. And then you don't have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning with them when they're crying. And you might only have to change a couple of diapers and deal with a couple of meltdowns. And then you get to give them back to mom and dad. It's that simple.
Right.
You ain't even got that far yet, have you, Jim? Your girls are still in college, right?
Yeah, I have 5 daughters altogether, but only 2 grandkids so far, and they're
You do have grandkids.
10 and 8. So
5 daughters. My God, I am so sorry.
Dylan's only one behind you. He's got 4 daughters, man.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and his wife. So that's a house full.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I do have a daughter. I have 3 sons and a daughter. But man,
8, and you laughing at me?
What?
8
kids. No, I have 1 daughter. Singular.
Oh, okay. Excuse me.
Oh my God, if I had 8 daughters, you think I would have time to be doing podcasts? I'd have a second job. Because I see the stuff the little girls want now. That when I was in middle school, little girls wore their own natural nails, and they were still using crayons and pretending like there was a fingernail polish. These girls now have full manicures and pedicures and eyelashes to come out. Some of them got the eyelashes so long they look like the giant wind turbines to generate electricity.
That is such a great storyline for a horror story.
What?
We gotta be text. We got to text at Jordan Peele about that. Write a story about a father in a family of like 6 daughters, and it turns bad on him.
Well, they all turn out to be
Jordan Peele could do
evil
it. Jordan
creatures.
Peele could do it.
Jordan Peele. I have been ridiculously surprised at Jordan Peele because I already knew the guy was a comic genius.
Right.
He and Michael Key together.
Yep.
But his horror,
oh my God, it's great.
Get Out, Us, Them, nope.
I was giving him with Get Out. I was like, I liked it, but can you do this again? So what's he do? he comes up with that. What was the one where they're all just standing there in mirror images and all that?
Us.
That was crazy, man. I was
Us.
like, yeah, Us. That was just freaking crazy. I'm like, oh my God, dude, this guy's got talent, man.
I don't know. I think
the Twilight Zone, of course. We just got finished discussing Jordan Peele with Dylan.
I tend to think guys that have that kind of talent also have some kind of like there's something in there that they need to get out. You know what I mean?
Jim.
No, I'm talking about like the guys that go like way off the deep. Like I plan to get. I'm going to read these. I'm going to get these and read. How many are there? 6 altogether?
Yes.
6.
I love a good series because
that's the first one right there, Forged to Death.
Yeah.
I love a good series because especially when it's really good and when you get to the end and right when you get to the end, you don't realize you get to the end like, oh man, what? No, and then you got to wait for the next one to come out before you can read it.
Yeah,
you just described his cliffhangers right on spot, man.
So yeah, but when you have a guy that just goes, I mean, like there was a skit that he did on the Key and Peele show where they brought in this guy that was supposed to be the best detective in the world. And he was like, there was a scuffle here. And somebody pushed here, and that's where the blood spatter is. And then he just whips it out, and he just goes, and he's like, And then the next clue is over here. He does this all over the house. Like, and that's a skit that he wrote. And that kind of stuff, I'm like, yeah, Jordan's got some.
Yeah, he's got some twisted thinking upstairs, man.
Yeah. Like, how do you from your head just go, I gotta to get it out. I got to get it out. Literally.
That's the id. You remember the id? You know what the id is?
Yes,
That-
the ego and the id.
right, from the Forbidden Planet thing. That was great. Oh man, that was a great story too. I hadn't even thought about that in a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking in the literal sense. I wasn't even talking about but yes.
No, that's what that movie was all about, or that story was all about, was the id and how crazy it can be. And that's you
It's
just
like,
nailed that.
whatever feels good, do it. The other one's going, no, it's literally the angel and the devil. It's literally what it is.
Subconscious and the logical thinking part of your brain.
Yeah, you know that's against the law in like 48 states, right? At least publicly. Yeah.
Where's that 49th state at?
Right. Well, apparently it's wherever Antonio Brown was a couple of weeks ago.
Oh God,
he's still walking around free.
Oh my God, he had to be doing that on purpose. Like, this is what I think, you NFL, whatever.
Yeah. Well, at least we know it's not legal in Cleveland. We're not going to start that again. I just brought that up to
This Cleveland steamer.
Let that roll right on by. Jim, you didn't happen to see that episode, did you?
No, I don't think I did.
We went on a tangent. Somehow they went on it. Somebody started in the comments about Cleveland, and they were talking about Deshaun Watson. And the comment section that at that point, up until that point, maybe only had 3 people commenting, devolved into just this level of debauchery.
There was 185 comments on that show, man.
By the time that show was over, when they cut it off, it was up to like 185 comments, and all of a sudden there were like 8, 9, 10 people watching. I don't know who started spreading the word. It's almost like, hey guys, there's a fight in the cafeteria. And they're like, people fight here every day. It's 2 nerds from the science department. And everybody goes around. God, it was just joke after joke, and towels and tugs and anything that had anything to do with tug or rub or towel or.
It doesn't sound like it's over yet either.
No, it's every now and again somebody throws one in there somewhere on a Thursday night.
That other they came out and announced that this happened back when the others happened, so it's not going to count against his suspension.
Okay.
But unless, and they emphasized the unless they can prove new charges.
Yeah.
So it's not over until it's over.
I don't think that kid's gonna play this year.
Oh,
we know. Wait. Hold on.
Impact.
We know that the NFL is notorious. Like I said, Ray Rice. They were going to let Ray Rice play until the video came out.
Right.
You know, if Michael Vick, if there had been no footage of the kennels, Michael Vick never would have done a day in jail. I think. What's his name? Ray Lewis. They had no proof. There was no video back then. There weren't a whole lot of camera phones. So, the jury said not guilty, and he got to come back. You know what I mean? If Ray Caruth had stayed in North Carolina and just said, I didn't do it, and went to court, and he was found not guilty, he probably would have had some semblance of a career in the NFL, because the NFL is showing itself to be Dan Snyder's got Congress looking at him right now, and he still owns the football franchise, for crying out loud.
Oh, yeah. You saw that interview tonight with Roger Goodell?
I did not.
Oh, it don't look like Roger Goodell was trying to dance around it, because we know Roger Goodell has been after Dan Snyder, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, they kept asking him about the vote and stuff, and he said, well, it was unanimous, to keep we just heard a week ago that what was it, Dan Snyder had dirt on these other owners. And now when it comes to the vote, it's unanimous to keep him in. That's insanity, man. I don't understand how he got away with open blackmail when it's all in the press.
Well, here's the thing. The owners don't like Dan Snyder because they found out he was cooking the books. Are we still on? I mean, we could probably take this offline because we're so not talking about books now.
Yeah, we can end the show here. We're pretty much finished, and I'm looking at Jim, and he looks like he's getting pretty tired there. So.
Yeah, no, that was